Right, welcome back. You're watching Sokoni here on Morning Prime. We continue apace with our conversation looking at the current state of play of our economy and some of the promissory notes that we got from the president. What are some of the quick wins? Fertilizer, fuel prices being big on his table, and also Diaspora and other after issues that we want to talk about, including the dry port of Naivasha and Mombasa right now. But before we even go there, I can see here from the social media, we have Mulimbani VD, who has actually taken a caption of The Nation. This is the daily from Malawi, right? And it says, petrol pump price down by 200 kwacha per litre. Malawi Energy Regulatory Authority has reduced the pump price of petrol by 200 kwacha or 10.28% with effect from today, but maintained prices for diesel and paraffin. The price reduction means motorists will now pay, that is 746 per litre of petrol, down from 946 per litre, according to the statement signed by the Mera Board chairperson, Rekford Kapanje. So why are we reading from a different script? Or maybe they have different dynamics of the economy?
Well, it may be that they had overpriced their petrol.
They overpriced their petrol.
So in this particular case, they realized, what we've done is we've actually overpriced it. So let's bring it down. I think we've got to know very, very much more before we actually make a judgment on that. Because I think it's very easy just to, talk about a number, but unless you actually see the dynamics and all the things that contribute to that particular number, you're not going to be clear about things at all. So I think it's very easy to look at a single number and say, look, this is what this country is doing, and we're doing the opposite. Wow, this is terrible. But it could be that, they had overpriced it previously, and now they're actually bringing the price down. So that could be the case.
Indeed. Thank you.
But I remember, there was a time when one kwacha was 10 Kenya shillings. Today, all right, I don't know how many kwacha you need in order to buy 1 Kenya shilling. So, the economy of Zambia, unfortunately, has been in a terrible situation for many years because of their over-reliance on copper, in fact. But they're getting farming together now.
Oh, Malawi. This is Malawi.
Is that Malawi?
This is Malawi.
Okay, Malawi, the same. The problem of Malawi is that they're very, very dependent on tobacco. And now, 2 years ago, it was the first time in the history of the world that the modern world, that the demand for tobacco is actually dropping now. So many of the farmers in Malawi are going to find that they're producing a crop which is not going to be consumed as much internationally. So they have a real problem as to how to diversify in Malawi. Mind you, they produce tea, and that tea is actually sold in the tea auction in Mombasa. Okay, they're one of the countries that actually exports their tea through the port of Mombasa, bringing it here to. And I think it's always important for everyone to know this. It's not only Kenya tea that goes out through Mombasa. We have Tanzanian tea, Malawi tea, Rwandan tea, Ugandan tea as well. So it's very important we're all aware of that,
Indeed.
Because this is not a group of people fixing a price for Kenya tea. It's a group of people who are buying on behalf of Pakistan, on behalf of Egypt, on behalf of Saudi Arabia, etc., etc., etc.
Thank you. Right, let's not just belabor that point, but quickly just look at that issue of the taxpayers now who will foot the bill on route of hot order. Also, you can follow the story at the back page of the Daily Nations. Kenyans will bear the brunt of repaying the Chinese loans should SGR business reduce. And earlier on, Bilokero, you began by saying, some of these orders that have come from the president were way quick off the mark. He should have maybe just settled, reviewed them, and see what will be the likely blowbacks that will come from those orders as well. So let's just explore this particular space right now and the import and the gravity of this order, especially to Naivasha dry port, first of all, and taking back the business to Mombasa. I don't know, many Kenyans, they're normally seeing opportunities. They want to go faster, buy land. I saw a tweet, someone saying, oh, now the prices of land in Naivasha were going for up to 4 million. So if you want to sell it off right now, this is the time to do it very quickly. By next week or next month, it will be actually 3,000 per acre there.
I think when the Uhuru Ruto regime in 2013 came up with the SGR, their concern was the cost of freight, and overall our competitiveness in the region.
Yes,
and freight was a major concern by the manufacturers and businesses. And in their first budget, I remember, they said they would reduce the cost of freight from Mombasa to Nairobi from 140,000 shillings on a 40 foot to about 30,000 by use of SGR. So one of the objectives of SGR was really on freight. That objective apparently was not achieved. That the cost of freight by SGR is more or less the same as it is on the trucks. But more importantly, I think the way the design of the SGR itself was done, and the where it terminates, and you have to still pick cargo from there and so forth. So it has not become very popular. So the figures by KEBS, you remember, in the first 3 years of operation, SGR was only able to transport 70 million tons out of, and Mombasa port handles 35 million tons annually. So you can imagine how far off the mark SGR was. So I think, but more importantly, I think the so many other services that are related to direct and indirectly in the port were affected, and so politically then it gained currency that SGR, the port operations should revert back to Mombasa. But there's no doubt that slowly I think the freight was picking up in SGR. But not anywhere near what comes in through Mombasa. It's still a very small fraction if you've seen despite all the amount of money that has gone into it, 500 billion plus, you have one freight, it's one in the morning and in the evening. It's the only time you'll see the SGR operating, and they're not really that busy. So the trucks are still on the road. The cost of freight has not, so it has not helped us in our product, in our competitiveness, whatever. All the real objective had not been achieved. But this action, I think, is more about the port of Mombasa and the benefits to the many institutions and industries and offices and services that are being provided. All those container freight stations, all those port activities. When containers coming, they would be kept there. Those guys all those businesses were making money, and the clearance was easier. Now, in some cases, you have to get all the way to Naivasha to get your things cleared. And then probably some of it is coming back to Nairobi. So I think there was a sense in which it was not seamless. The operation of the SGR and the Naivasha was not designed to move very smoothly. But there's no doubt that this action will also cost the investments that have already been made in Naivasha. A lot of people have already set up along the routes, especially that Mahiu area. People have taken up a lot of land. Offices have been set up. Many logistic companies are there. Governments have been offered land so that they can actually have their dry port there, so that all their goods can come. But none of the governments have taken up the offer. Uganda declined, I think, and South Sudan and others. They have not taken up that offer. And I think so Mombasa still remains the favorite position really in terms of clearing your goods. It's easier, it's more efficient, even for people who are bringing their containers. For small businesses particularly, they found Mombasa is more efficient than getting, if you're bringing just one container, you're importing stationery, it's easier for you to do all your things in Mombasa and ship your container to Kitui, to Nairobi, to some place than to get it, all the way. So I think though it's a decision that was coming, and I mean it was expected, because they had given the pledge, but the consequences, the effects on particularly on the dry port and the replacement, because you said it's going to be replaced with an industrial city. Industrial city is not a government waking up and putting up industries and start manufacturing tables and papers. No, I mean, they would expect to provide some incentives for investors to come and put up like Konza. And those things take long in coming because investors don't want to just go. They want to see what incentives are there. Why would I relocate my business from Nairobi to Naivasha? What incentives? So I think that may be long in coming, but I think this decision has already been made, and it appears hopefully we hope that it will help the economy.
Indeed. But if we may ask and talk about idle capacity, now that we're shifting all the services back to Mombasa, heavy investment has been made in that particular port. We can talk about the asset utilization and asset sweating as well in a country where we're trying to tame our wastage. How then do we address this issue? Because it was capital intensive in the first place.
Yeah, I think Billo has made a number of very good points, but you know, there is an article in today's paper, and this is why it's so important always to read the newspaper, because a lot of people don't, and then we start using armchair economics to make arguments and so on. I'm not saying that your arguments are armchair economics.
I'm sitting on it.
You know, there is a report here which says, you see, that, you know, the SGR, actually moved in the month of July this year, 543,944 tons, which is in fact 50.5% more than the same period last year. And last year, the SGR moved 5,407,406 tons, and up to July this year, it's moved 3.5 million tons. So I think it's always important, but you know, the point that Billo mentioned is, what is the point of putting a container on a train, taking it to Naivasha, and then taking it back to Mombasa? Now, that is an unnecessary cost. And, you know, it'll be interesting to see what these numbers are in a year's time. Because obviously, if you're not taking the goods right to, you know, Naivasha, there's going to be lower transportation there. But I think, you know, for Kenya, let's face it, Kenya as a whole is going to benefit from this particular decision. Why? If you talk to people in Mombasa, they would say, look, business here in Mombasa is dead. There are very few tourists coming from abroad. It hasn't picked up yet. We have to keep in mind that in the year 2019, Kenya earned 164 billion Kenya shillings from tourism. Now, in today's economy, that would actually be 20% more. It would be 200 billion. It's a lot of money. Now, you'll see tourists in their tourist vans going around at the moment, but we've got a long way to go before tourism gets back to what it was pre-COVID. As I say, in April 2020, there were 9 tourists in Kenya. That was after we had imposed the lockdown, on the 13th of March, which we had to do because, you know, COVID was a real problem. But anyway, you see, if you talk to people in Mombasa, they say, look, business here is dead. By doing this particular thing, by taking that work down to Mombasa, we're going to see a much more vibrant Mombasa. And we're going to see costs reduce. Why? Because we're not doing useless work. Work is fantastic for us human beings. That's what we are made to do. But to take a container from Mombasa to Naivasha and then take it back down again is absolute nonsense.
Doesn't make any
sense.
So
I would agree with Billo here entirely. And that's a very wise thing to do.
Right. Prof.
I think both ports can still work. You just have to figure out which freight is going to the western part of the country.
Correct.
And is it cheap?
Correct.
Whichever freight is going, it is coming to Nairobi, and it can come through the inland container depot. I think we have one one in Nairobi. Now, because you're looking now at the balance of the economic losses between the two communities. You're looking at Naivasha, you're looking at Mombasa. So the president really has to balance those. And I like what Bill said. If you're going to stop in Mombasa, in Naivasha, we may as well have gone all the way to Malaba for the freight that's going to Rwanda and Uganda and the other countries for that matter. But I think it's a balancing act between the two communities. But I still think the two can still work. With the freight coming from Mombasa, it will be cheaper to come by train to Naivasha. If it's going to Eldoret, Kisumu and those other areas, then the trucks can pick them up in Naivasha. But if it's coming from Nairobi, going back that way, then Mombasa can be able to serve that region as well. So it's going to have to be a balancing act. Otherwise, we are looking at serious losses between other investors in Naivasha, and also Mombasa people will be happy when it goes back. But then you go back to the inefficiencies that were there at the port before all this happened. So there's a lot of things that need to be done in order to balance both the economic losses, economic gains, and the effective operation of the port itself.
Right. Thank you.
Yes, my comment is moving forward, we have to manage very well what we call public policy, because an investment of that magnitude must be guided by empirical studies and then a collective decision to make the investment. By the way, it seems there was somewhere where the consultation was not completed, because you can't put up an investment and within a year it is reversed. So that reversal shows that maybe the consultation was not concluded. We have similar cases of many what we used to call white elephant projects in this country, which were unilaterally done, lots of taxpayer money, and many of them never took off. And I saw that in my days as chair of ICDC. We found all kinds of projects which never took off. So moving forward, to avoid this very high drain on the taxpayers, we need to have a much more consultation. We need to have policies. We need to have decisions that are government decisions, not personal decisions. From what we're reading, this is on private land and so forth. There are many other issues which shows that perhaps that was not done. But I'm surprised that 50 years down the train, these things are still happening. I thought we had gotten rid of the white elephants.
No, you see, the issue, these things, some of the decisions, and this has been said by President William Ruto just before he was sworn in, during the campaigns, that what we agreed, he said, as Jubilee, was not to put up a dry port in Naivasha, but to put up an industrial city. And that what the President Uhuru did later was not what they had agreed, and that it was zona. This just points to the fact that the issues of policy is important. But one of the things that has characterized the leadership of former President Uhuru Kenyatta has been his obsession with what I always call legacy projects, things which he wants done because he thinks that is the right thing, not because that's what the government collectively agreed. He says, I want this. For example, the port in Mombasa. We spent nearly over 42 billion to put up those 3 berths. It's lying idle. You are not able to utilize Mombasa fully. You put up another 142 billion in anticipation of the lapset thing, and you don't know when this thing would do. So, and his argument has always been that, look, I'm looking ahead. And he gives that example of the Lunatic Express. So, but I think even SGR, even the 5 million that they did last year is nothing compared to the total tonnage of goods, which is 35 million annually from Mombasa Port. So it's a small fraction. So it has not been really, but more importantly, if the objective was freight, reduce the cost of freight to manufacturers, and to businesses. It has not succeeded. You talk to the industries, they'll still tell you the cost of raising a single vehicle challenge.
But Debal, I think what we can say also is...
Because we're pinched for time.
Just a quick one.
On the diaspora factor, yes.
Yeah, before we come to diaspora, the issue about cabinet. I think we've had a challenge in terms of cabinet meetings for them to approve and make a government, collective government decision. But I'm sure that moving forward, the cabinet will come out more forthrightly in terms of what is what is a government decision. Hopefully, yeah. But I have a feeling.
I think let's wait for the constitution of the cabinet. On the face of it, then we can talk about it.
And probably apart from President Kibaki, I think Ruto is much more focused.
Hands-on.
He's very hands-on on what needs to be done. And therefore, we expect deliberations to take place. We expect him to lead by actually with facts of before we make an investment. I'm sure the president will need a lot. We'll have to look at a lot of things that need to be answered, a lot of questions that need to be answered before he makes those decisions. He's more focused than probably any other president.
Right. So there is a Twitter MCA here on Twitter who is giving an example of how Kenya should study Ethiopia, how Ethiopian citizens and their diaspora raised $5 billion to build the Grand Renaissance Dam after failure to secure international financing, which projected to earn $1 billion, I should say, per year from electricity sales, among other economic benefits. Just to act as a segue or an entry to now the diaspora factor as well.
Right.
From our remittances that we have, they've not been really channeled towards development. It's been purely
consumption,
consumptive, right? Going to families. Though we have this $2.36 billion, but
in the first 7 months of this year.
Yes.
Yeah.
How are they then able to consolidate this remittance towards a particular project? That maybe this can be a learning point as well. Let's just begin with you.
Yes, thank you, Dibal. I sit on the board of the Kenya Diaspora Alliance. Let me begin by saying we are overwhelmed by the gesture of the president to create a ministry for diaspora. It's something we've been wishing for, and it is something that the country needs. Now, a few things which are significant to talk about. In 2015, the government, through the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, came up with the diaspora policy. Now, when the diaspora policy was launched, part of it, the driving force was the economic diplomacy. That is something we saw that was going to turn our relationship and bilateral relationship with countries to be pegged more on economic interaction rather than just purely politics, which was historical. Now, one of the things that we try to do very much as a diaspora organization was the issue of dual citizenship, because we pushed that to Parliament, and we are very happy that that also came through, so that Kenyans can benefit from both here and wherever they are hosted. They can, if their tax or their investment funds available to citizens of the other country, a Kenyan abroad can take advantage of that and come back here. Now, we try to come up with initiative. One of the things moving forward, as we appreciate this, what the president has done, we were thinking of coming up with a diaspora bank. It's something which has been discussed. Because when you are remitting this kind of funds, you need to consolidate. What the issue you have raised is very important. That how do you track? Some come through M-Pesa from the UK, some comes through Western Union, some come in people's pockets and so forth. So it's more or less an estimate. So with a diaspora bank, two things to be achieved. Number one, at the moment, the three main allocations for these funds is education, Kenyans helping education of relatives, it's healthcare, sick people in hospitals, and the other one is purely household support, unga and so forth. We were thinking that now those Kenyans, apart from what they are doing in terms of social support, that we can call that social support, that they can also come and take advantage of the opportunities available in this country. One of them is we were thinking of coming up with a diaspora bond, which is the example you're giving of Ethiopia. I'm sure with a diaspora bond, we can raise billions for Kenyans to participate, even in what has been discussed about privatization of state organizations and so forth. Collectively, they can take a stake as an organization. We have also, the other very crucial area is the issue of skills. On the issue of skills, we have an extremely skilled workforce in Kenya, but many of them, we have what you're calling brain drain because of the atmosphere existing and so forth, lack of opportunities. Many are out there. So some of the challenges we're facing here, we can tap into the diaspora database. We have the richest and most amazing database of Kenyan professionals. You will be amazed how qualified Kenyans are. So some of the things we're grappling here, that how do you run ministries, how do you run county accountability in the counties, that can be mainstreamed. And Professor Kibutha Kibwana did it in Makueni. He had an officer who was just responsible for diaspora affairs. And I think that was very visionary, and I wish that can be mainstreamed, that in each county there's somebody. Why? Because Kenyans coming back home, some of them can go and be plugged directly to the counties. They don't all have to come and hustle here in Nairobi. They can go and help in terms of devolution and resuscitation at that level. Now, the other fourth thing which is very important, you've heard about what is happening in Saudi Arabia. There's all kinds of issues. Now, through this ministry, we can try and find out much more accurately the labor market out there and how legit are the jobs being offered to people out. So those are some of, I would say, summary things. But I can tell you that this was a very visionary thing by the president to come up with this diaspora. Because right now it's about 5%. And this can move easily to 15%. Because a lot of money, as we're saying, is not tracked. So now, with our policy papers, we need now to engage with the government and see how does this ministry in itself. And you will find that this is the ministry which will take care of what we are calling international trade. Is going to be done through this diaspora.
Thank you. Thank you. Right.
I think as a diaspora returnee.
Yes, and an active member.
Okay.
And an active member of the diaspora. And it's true what my brother is talking about in terms of what you need to do with, within this ministry. It's good it's been separated from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Absolutely.
We've been arguing about this for the last probably 10, 12 years, since around 2010. Now, three things that my brother here just went through. One, the risking of diaspora money coming into this country.
Can I take only one? Because
yeah. Okay. Two, deliberate brain drain, reverse brain drain. And that worked very well with South Korea. South Korea developed because of a deliberate reverse brain drain by President Park in 1967. By the time he fully implemented that in 1975, by about 1980-85, Korea was a developed country because of a reverse brain drain. Bring all the professionals back, plug them back into the economy, have them use their expertise now to help cross-fertilize with the Kenyan professionals so that they are able now to have a different perspective of running things, and they are able now to bring in the investment, the expertise, the doctors, the lawyers, the professors, the engineers, all these people to come back and start now being active members, economic members of this country. Number 3 is to call all these funds that are coming to purposeful investments instead of all this money going to consumption. Number 4, the issue of human rights is extremely important, especially for our ladies who are going to the Middle East. We have seen all these things taking place, and this ministry, I have seen our women in the Middle East screaming and crying at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is totally deaf to some of their problems. So this ministry needs to take care of that, to make sure that the human rights of our people who are working overseas, and especially our women, are protected. And when they go there, there is a bureau that will be able to take care of their jobs, of their affairs when they are there, independent of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And that will be much, much more helpful. Let me tell you, when I was advising the government of Vietnam, part of the things that we did was the training of foreign labor. That's about 2007, 2006, 2008, when I was working with some of the ministries there. And the deliberate effort of figuring out what is available in terms of resources, in terms of skill gaps in other countries, and training those individuals in this country that can fill in those slots, and having a deliberate government effort to do that, we increase the number of professionals that we are sending outside the country. We are talking about nurses and plumbers and all this. When we do that, then it becomes another bigger source of even more revenues, and we are hoping that this ministry will be able to do all those things. And other than the more than 600 billion that's coming, we should be going towards almost 1 trillion shillings with money coming from overseas, with Kenyans who are working there and being productive citizens in those countries, and the money that they're putting in those countries should be able to come back and help this country. And the creation of a diaspora bond is extremely, extremely important. It's a safe investment. And therefore, you don't have to worry about sending people money here, and that money ends up being... I've been a victim myself. And I'm sure those who have been overseas, you send millions of shillings, and you think you're buying a piece of land, and then the piece of land, the pictures you've been given, when you show up, somebody else has already built there, and your money is gone. So all those things have to be put into perspective and call all this money towards productive investments that will help this country grow.
Bilo?
The decision, I think, to set up the ministry has already been made from the announcement that we have had the president make. Is it the best decision? Well, that we'll wait to see. But of course, the only country I know in the world where there's a ministry of diaspora is Israel. And Israel, because of its ideological nature, everyone who lives, if you're a Jew and you're anywhere in the world, you're a citizen. But
I think even the term diasporans emanated from Israel.
Yeah. So there's no other country. Countries like India, which has the largest diaspora, over 30-40 million people, and they earn $100 billion annually. Doesn't have a ministry. Egypt, the largest, the top 10 in the world also, it makes over $30 billion, Egypt, from diaspora. But I think for me the most important thing, the question you asked is, of course, most of the remittances we are getting to relatives, consumption. But there are also many Kenyans nowadays coming to buy properties and try and. So if the investment environment, the economy itself is good and the returns are good, that number will double. The 2 billion will go up to 3, 4, 5 billion. So it's about the environment. It's not as much about the ministry as it is on the business environment or the economic environment and the opportunities. I think that is what is important. What the government can do, in regard to your question, is probably create some investment, some PSVs, some, for example, on some specific infrastructure bond for diaspora, with returns which are more competitive than what you would get on Nairobi Stock Exchange or in any other opportunities that are available in the country. But so I think it's the environment, the business environment, the economic environment. If it improves, you'll find more inflows. I mean, instead of to get an investment in US, if you're working in US, you know it, or in UK, wherever. I mean, to get a very viable return, a good return is not an easy thing to. But in Africa, the returns are much higher than in any of those. So I think the government can find some public, some special purpose SPVs to try and see if they can attract specific funding
But
for specific projects.
Primarily also, Bilo, I think the greatest frustration for the diasporans has been the cost of the remittance itself, right? When they're sending this money also, that cost element, if it can be looked, and I hoped since you sit in the board of Diaspora, we'll have actually spoken to the cost element of remittance. If you want to get a huge chunk of money...
That's why we want a bank.
That's why you want the bank.
Yeah. But before we get to the bank, I think the fintechs can actually fill that gap, where the cost is minimal when you're sending money, and you don't have to wait for days. It's with the fintech, it's a click on that side, the money comes out on this side. So it makes it so much easier to get the money in and out of all the countries.
The government wants to get a little bit of that as well.
They're controlled.
Yeah.
Now, you see, when we talk about a specific bank for the diaspora, or as we call it in Kenya, Diaspora, the fact is that, you know, I don't think we're talking business. The position here, okay, is that, okay, is this bank, you know, Bill himself has said, when we are talking about the fertilizer Kengen, the government can't do this. Now, we're talking about a bank. This bank, is it going to be, who's it going to be owned by? Who's it, you know, I think there are many, many aspects, okay, which, you know, is this bank going to be able to monitor a person sending money to buy some land in Ukambani? That land will really be there? I don't think so. You know, I think what we've got to do is we've always got to think through these things in an enormous amount of detail, because we've got to come down to the facts on the ground all the time. And, you know, the point that Bilo makes, there's one other country in the world, or maybe Ireland has got a ministry for the diaspora. If I have past students, okay, if I'm Rose Kariuki living in San Francisco, I've got a brother in Embu who needs his fees. I will send money for that. You talk about putting all of this money together. You know, look, I've got my problems in the US. I've got my problems in the UK. I've got my problems in Switzerland. I've got my problems in South Africa. I've got my problems in Australia. So I'm going to send it to Mama, to Baba. But Baba is not, you know, the political Baba. It's my real Baba. Okay? You know, so these are the people. Who are actually going to, you know. And I'm concerned with my family. And you know, we had a politician yesterday who was saying, look, I think it was Gachagua who said, look, the family is the thing that supports you. He's absolutely right. In the Western world, they're trying to destroy the family. We've got to maintain that particular solidarity, which, you know, is part of African heritage. And I feel, you know, don't get the government in this business. You know, let Tom, Dick, and Rose Kariuki in San Francisco look after their own affairs. And she doesn't have, you know, additional money to start putting into a bond here. We certainly would get a return, a bigger return here. But who pays for that? It's the one inch of Kenya. Because, you know, in this particular case, we have a bond at the moment which you can get a return of 13.74% on it. How is Kenya going to pay that rate of interest? Kenya is, you know, so this has got to come out of tax. So here we talk about infrastructure bond, I've got to have a good return. Wait a moment. The people have to pay that money at the end of the day. And we've got to be aware of that. You know, there's no, you know, there's no free lunch or dinner or breakfast or anything. Someone has got to pay. If we've got a high-yielding bond for our diaspora, they will benefit, but they're already benefiting because the salary they get. I'm writing a letter at the moment for one of my past students to go and work in Guernsey. The salary he gets there is much higher than in Nairobi. That's why he's going there. And I've got another lady who's going to Bermuda from Deloitte here. Why is she going there? Because she has a much higher salary there than she has here. Now, can we then start interfering with those people and saying, hey, you know, look, you got to put this, we got a new bridge in Mtwapa, okay? You got to put this money there. Watch ya. I want to do my own thing.
With your own money. Yeah.
I know.
I think, Jim, I think that the whole idea, and if you listen to President Ruto, what he's saying, we need to start creating a savings culture in this country.
Absolutely.
And the only way to do that is to have organized programs that allow people to save. If you look at Japan, most of the borrowing in Japan is done internally. And that's why Japan is over 200% borrowed over its GDP, because it's internal borrowing. So instead of me floating a Eurobond and that money is going to Europe or that money is going to China, that money comes to the Kenyans who are here, because they have all these dollars that are sitting in the account. If you have somebody in the US and they have $10,000 that are sitting in an account, would you rather just have that money sitting there? The interest rates are very low. If you have what you call the safety deposit, I mean the long-term deposits, they're very low. So instead of doing that, I would rather come and put that money in a bond that is going to give me a certain level of income every single month, and I know I'm helping my country at the same time. So it's about creating a savings culture within our people. Those people in the, and there's a lot of money with our people in the diaspora. And that person who is making $30,000 a year is able to say, now, of my $30,000 a year, I'm going to save $10,000 or $5,000 after taxes, and this money is going into this bond that's happening, is going to that investment. We start encouraging our people for a savings culture. And that's why you have people who have been in those countries for so many years, and they're afraid of coming back because they have not been able to save. So, and that's why we, within the diaspora community, we are saying, let's get organized and have very strategic investments in this country. Absolutely. But they have to be done in a way that creates wealth for the people who are already in the other countries. It helps them, it helps the families here, it also helps the country. Instead of paying these interest rates to the Chinese, to the Europeans, to all these other people,
we use the money
interest
rates to Kenyans.
We use all this. We use the money that Kenyans are producing in other countries to develop our own country. So it's both patriotic, it's both creation of wealth. At the same time, it's creating a safety net for them when they come back to this country. Because at some point they'll come back.
Is a bit of a friend. Kibron was not here today because you would disagree with me. Because our capital markets is inundated with money, my friend. If there is any, you've seen every time they float a bond or an IPO, it's subscribed.
Especially the infrastructure.
Kenyans are not. The question is not Kenyans are not saving. Kenyans are not getting an opportunity to invest. The issue we were discussing here last week. When was the last time you saw a government placing any of its companies on the stock exchange or any of the private companies? Where, you know, every business here is more or less family. You know, businesses are coming up. Very few companies are trying to look for money on the capital markets, but the opportunity for funding is there. So the savings is not a major problem, I can assure you. If the government wants to do things, they can raise all the money they want on the capital markets. The government has abandoned the capital markets for a long time, and this is the issue I think Brown has been raising many times. But I agree with Dr. McFie. There's no way you can have a preferential bond or a preferential investment terms for diaspora. And that is going to...
We don't expect
that will not happen. That will not happen. But today, at diaspora people, what they need is to be organized and to be... Information is power.
Yeah.
What probably they need to do in your ministry... I hope you come to
Thank you.
is to take that information out there to them about the bonds that are available, the opportunities on the capital markets, the opportunities for investments, the opportunity. You know, I think sometimes when you are out busy working in those places, you may not be privy to most of the information that is available. So the opportunities, like when you go to, is it called the investment authority? We have an investment authority. When you go to the office, you've seen their brochures.
Yeah,
it gives you a list. Yeah, it gives you a list of all the investment opportunities and whatever that is available. I think that kind of thing is probably that you guys will work on, but I don't think I will see a situation where the government of Kenya will have a preferential bond or investment.
I don't think that's going to happen. But the issue also having PE funds. That money coming from the diaspora funds, and people invest. If you go to Nigeria, for example, there are PE funds that get their funding from from the folks in the diaspora. And that therefore they are able to make other investments for them as well. So there are many vehicles that we can be able to put together. It's a lot of money that is coming into this country, but it just disappears into consumption. The other investments that are being made are not really producing them the kind of returns they would expect them to do. So Bill, Jim and Bill, we don't expect preferential treatment as diasporans. But what you expect is the money that is coming from the people in the diaspora is geared towards investments that will not only help this country, but also yield, not just consumption.
So what do you make also on the programs that we have? So you're talking about reverse brain drain, right? That we've lost good expertise. Even though I think in the Atomic Energy Agency, we have one Kenyan there. There are good fine minds around the world who will astound us. We talk of Rolls-Royce as well. There are good engineers there, female for that matter at the end of the day. But we have a scenario where you have our country having an exchange program, so to speak, also with the UK, where we have our nurses who have better terms outside there, but we still encourage that to happen. Oblivious of the fact that we know here in this country, we're still suffering in terms of a shortage of nurses and healthcare workers at the end of the day. I don't know what you will really make about that, first of all.
That means we need to train more.
We need to train more.
Absolutely. Training for overseas labor should be a very specialized way of doing things. Let me tell you, a friend of mine in the US used to get nurses from India, a very good friend of mine. And India, Philippines, and a few other countries. And what the nurses used to do, they used to go to Singapore. They will get accreditation there in Singapore. By the time they land in the US, they are already accredited to work in the US. They will spend about 3 months there. They will pass their exams. Then they would go and start working in the US. So what that does is open other opportunities for us to train more nurses for the local economy as well, for the local market as well. And that allows us now to start expanding the tax base. These people go, they send money back. These people we train, they fill in these jobs.
But there are two things which are very crucial. And my friend Biro, I'm sure this one he'll agree with. Number one, in terms of skill, because of our education and background and very good lecturers like Dr. McFie, Kenyans have very good education.
Yeah.
That is number one. They speak good English, which is the major international language. Number three, they have a work ethics, especially when they are outside Kenya.
Yeah.
When we are here, maybe they learn the local things and things change. But out there, Kenyan professionals are preferred and sought for.
Yes, they are.
I can give you an example. I worked in one of the Southern African countries, and we had 12 of us Kenyans were heads of major organization in that particular country. Whether you said WHO, the head, regional head was a Kenyan. Whether you said ILO, it was a Kenyan. Myself and others. We could have held our meeting in Kiswahili if we're just talking about running things in that country. They were Kenyans. Can those Kenyans come and get a job here in government? Chances are no. They'll say tribal balancing, I don't know what region, all these kind of things. These guys will not work here. And some of them have come here and hung around and gone back.
Yes.
So that is one of the issues of brain drain. Secondly, let's talk something people don't like to talk about, privatization. Let's say today, you say we want to privatize 40% of a state corporation. The money Bill is talking about, a lot of it is very dubious money. Some of it is even taxpayers' money, which is recycled and brought back. Somebody comes, stolen, he was a governor somewhere, stole money, and comes and buys a state corporation through Seychelles or Mauritius or whatever, and you call that privatization. Why don't we give our sons and daughters who are out there a stake in the Kenyan economy? They are legitimate, they are people who are known. Rather than having very dubious characters here, taking strategic investment assets.
Yeah.
I saw it in Russia. All these oligarchs. They did exactly the same thing when Russia started privatizing. Eastern Europe, Hungary, Poland, it was people who were connected to the political class who took those strategic, and now they call themselves billionaires. So in Kenya's experience, I still insist through the Diaspora Ministry, let's get Kenyans to take a stake to come and help in rebuilding through that catalysm. Even if it is northeastern and you say there is an abattoir being put up, the Kenyans in Minnesota can finance that, own that abattoir. But we don't have a channel of doing things. They will be elbowed out by all kinds of people. That is my take.
Thank you.
On this issue.
Bill Okero, then we prepare our headline thoughts. We wind up.
No, I don't think we need to belabor the point Dr. McFie had said earlier about the nature of our expatriates or our Kenyans who are abroad are mainly people who are working. And so the type of remittances are mostly small remittances. There are about 3 million Kenyans abroad.
Yeah.
So these are small remittances that are mostly for support for the families. But and the opportunity for investments are not limited to Kenyans only. The opportunity for investments are there, and we have got some of those people back. By the way, the brain drain thing. I remember during the time of Moi there was a dream team, and some of those guys were all experts who are working in Washington and IMF. They came back and later even Kibaki, I remember, the PS foreign and so forth. You got quite a few people back, but I think it did not change the landscape so much. Maybe it came back to an ocean.
To the system of doing things that he was talking about.
But let us have the ministry. Let's have the ministry.
Yeah.
And then, when you sit on your desk there in the ministry, then maybe you'll find something.
We're watching for you. Dr.
So, you see, it's very good to talk great ideas. Unilever was going to put a factory in Mombasa. Now, you have to talk to the governor of Mombasa. You have to talk to KEBS. You have to talk to the KRA. The rent being paid in the special economic zone there is horrendously high. Tabu, kila pahali, tabu. That factory is operating today in Dubai. So the point here really is, we're talking, we're going to solve problems. We're going to put a bank. We're not going to solve any problem. These rich guys will elbow out these. If Rose Kariuki is in San Francisco, how is she going to have control over this governor, ex-governor, okay, who now is looking, for his investments? We've got to have our feet on the ground, gentlemen. What exactly are we going to do? Because, this is why in Kenya, policy, law, implementation.
Zero.
Keshu bwana, keshu kutwa, labda.
Dr. McFie.
Nini kweli bwana.
This is a new beginning.
This is an old end.
It's a new dawn, and that's why.
Freedom must come. Freedom must come.
Labda.
And that's why. Yes, and that's why, Dr. McFie. It's not about policy or laws. It's about the will to do implementation. That's the problem we have. It has to be deliberate and very methodical. And that's what we are hoping that the new president will be able to do, being methodical and deliberate. And when that happens, things start to move.
Dr. McFie has seen it all.
I think he's been here long.
He's seen it all.
Yeah.
And so he says hallelujah. Let's say hallelujah, all of us. Thank you so much for your valid company. You've been watching Sokori.